just coming home today. So God bless America, the USA.
21 gun salute to all the fallen troops, active duty reserves and the veterans.
T. Rush, welcome to the show. Thank you for being our special guest today. How are you and the family?
Hello, sir. I'm doing well, and so is the family. We're all blessed, and we truly believe that and claim that. So,
Absolutely. That's what we always love to hear. Before we get into the show, bro, can you tell our audience a little bit about who you are, your background?
so as you know, my name is Tommy Rush. You've known me for years. I hail from Chicago, Illinois. Um, I am a veteran. I'm both Army and Coast Guard. My first tour was airborne infantry, and then somehow, miraculously, strangely, I transferred over to the Coast Guard, and I did my 17 years to make up a full 20 years as a storekeeper, and I retired.
Great.
Also, I'm married to my lovely wife, Jackie Rush. I have 3 kids, 4 grandkids. I, I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. That's wonderful. Man, we got a great show. I have some questions here for you today, and I can't wait to get the answers to them. So let's go ahead and get into it. My first question for you, T. Rush, is what inspired you to join the military?
So, believe it or not, Pearl, I back in the '80s, I used to watch this show called Combat, and early in my teenage years, I say around 10 to 13, I lived in a little country town for a little while, and we used to tromp through the swamps and with our little machine guns, and Rambo was on the scene back then, Predator was on the scene. It was very exciting and very prestigious to be a soldier, and so I knew that that's something that I was interested in doing, serving, not being a hero and doing like they do in the movies, but I knew I wanted to serve my country. So I'd say from the age 13, I knew I was going to join the Army.
Yeah, age 13. You knew you was coming through.
Yes, sir.
That's great.
And so just to kind of elaborate on what you said, in terms of what inspired me, it was that when I went to visit the recruiter, he had on the outfit and it was sharp. He smelled good, he looked good, and I was like, I want to be just like that brother. And so, sometimes I guess if we can see ourselves in a position, we're a little bit more confident about, working hard to try and strive and achieve that position.
Yes, I agree. Definitely. So when you joined the Army, when you went into the Army first, do you remember anything about boot camp? What was that boot camp experience like for you when you joined the Army?
So, the boot camp experience was a lot different between the two services. So for the Army, it was exciting to me because it was my declaration of independence, as to, hey, I'm becoming a man, I'm going to go and fight for my country, serve my country. So boot camp, even in the training environment, it was exciting. I remember going there and lining up to get shots as you go through the little processing once you first arrive at Fort Benning, which is where I was lucky enough to do boot camp. And then when they send you downrange on the cattle trucks, you get that culture shock when you get off that truck and they're yelling at you and they pushing you around and they giving you orders and you're trying to concentrate and stand at the position of attention and keep your eyes focused and do all the things that they're yelling at you to do. So like I said, it was exciting, and at the same time, it was very eye opening. It was a shell shock. Now,
Okay.
I will say, as you went through boot camp, I think about the different training environments, low crawling, just doing regular PT, all that stuff was new to me, and so it was like drinking from the fire hose in terms of learning what this new lifestyle was going to look like and be like in the service.
Said like drinking from a fire hose and turning brown. Yeah, I can imagine. So your first unit, what was your first unit experience like? What first unit did you go after boot camp?
After boot camp, you back then you could have a couple packages that attached. So I had a guaranteed school. I had guaranteed airborne school. So immediately following boot camp, I didn't get a chance to go home. I got there. I met with the first sergeant the first day that I reported, me and two other privates, because they process you downrange at a in between facility where they decide what battalion and what platoon and everything you're gonna get assigned to. And so once you go down, actually your first sergeant comes and picks you up and takes you back to your company, and then you beat them. So I met the first sergeant, and I had two other privates who had reported at the same time I did. Now we immediately dropped everything that we owned and went on a run for 4 miles. And so, that was our introduction and our test into his unit, because there's time. It usually takes you about 2 weeks to process downrange before you get to your unit, and they're encouraging you to do PT, but they don't enforce you to do PT. And so the guys who were with me weren't necessarily remaining diligent on their PT, and they start falling out the run. And that just kind of set the tone for that first sergeant. After the run, he had us all standing at parade rest, and he's talking to us about the unit. And, he's cussing these two guys out, and I'm just locked up as tight as I can get, staring eyes in the boat, dead ahead. And so it just kind of set a precedence, and, he gave me very light kudos. And then I reported and started learning who my platoon sergeant and the squad leaders and everything, and all the people that I was going to be stationed with for the next couple of years. I mean, It was an exciting experience, because at your first unit, you do a lot of different things. Jumping out of airplanes is one thing. It's road marching, it's PT, it's traveling to different countries. It's earning different awards and things of that nature, or different medals. For instance, I did travel to Germany, and if you do 3 German jumps at the time, you got a set of German jump wings, and you exchange the set of regular jump wings with the German soldiers, and that's how you got your German jump wing insignia or whatever. So that was exciting. And so throughout the entire tour, that first tour at my first unit, it was always something new. You never did the same thing, too repetitively. You did it repetitively enough to know your job, but we changed up environments. We changed up the temperature, everything. So I have nothing negative to say about that experience per se.
Yeah, it sounds fun though, getting to jump out of airplanes and stuff. Man, so you did say earlier that you were in the Army first. You started off your service in the Army, and then you transitioned to the Coast Guard. How was that transition?
Once I left the Army, I did my tour. I was an infantryman. I joined the reserves, and then I tried to get a job in the local area, but I still wasn't qualified to do much. Weapons handling, became a police officer or a security guard, but I already knew long term that's not what I wanted to do. So I ended up going back to the Army recruiter, and then I said, hey, while I'm doing this, why don't I diversify my bonds a little bit and check out what the other recruiters had going on. And, they had me retake the tests for different branches, and, they gave me job selections based on, or rates based on, those results. And I liked the Coast Guard's options the best. And so the Coast Guard recruiter, he was very non-pressure. There was no demand. He wasn't pressing the issue. He wasn't calling me or coming to my house. I like that portion about it. And then the transition was fairly smooth. I was still a young man in good condition. And so I didn't have a healthy or a real thick health record, with health problems. So I crossed over fairly easily.
The difference between the two boot camps, was there a stark difference between the Coast Guard boot camp and the Army boot camp?
Yes. And I guess, how can I explain this? After you've been to the boot camp once, you kind of know what to expect. So then everything doesn't necessarily catch you by surprise. So it's kind of unfair to me to say that the Coast Guard boot camp was less intense than the Army boot camp, because had I been, had I went there first and came off the cattle truck, I would have been like, hey, this is brand new, and these guys were yelling at me, and I was doing PT, and all the stuff that they have you do in boot camp. So ever so slightly, I would say that the Army boot camp was more intense because of physical exercise. With the Coast Guard boot camp, we didn't leave the little boot camp area per se, unless we were going to the range. Whereas the Army boot camp, we were low crawling up under barbed wire fences through puddles, and at one point you had to go underwater. There was obstacle courses. So it was a little bit more intense. You were shooting live fire weapons, not just the pistol, but an array of weapons. So from that regard, or that aspect, I would say that the Army boot camp was a little bit more intense.
A little bit more intense, yeah. That's great. Your first unit in the Coast Guard, how was that? What was that experience like?
So my first unit in the Coast Guard, I got my orders in boot camp to go to Integrated Support Command, Louisiana, in New Orleans, Louisiana, I should say. ISC Nolan.
Nolan.
And so I think it was a very challenging first unit, because after leaving the Army, I had to take a pay decrease. I dropped from being an E4 back to being an E3, to be in the Coast Guard. So, and then going to that particular area with my family, we were living below the poverty level for at least a year or so, because she couldn't find a job because she was kind of overqualified for some of the positions there in New Orleans. So it caused a little bit of a challenge in terms of that aspect. I really wanted everything to work out with the service, and I was motivated to be a Coastie. And so I was pushing to go to A school as soon as possible, which I did. And once I, pushed through A school, I had orders to go to my next unit.
You went to what school? What school did you go to?
After A school, I went straight to Coast Guard Cutter Tampa.
The 902. Okay. And for some of the viewers, young people who could potentially be desiring a career in the Coast Guard or any other branch of the military, can you explain what you did when you got to the Tampa?
So I had my regular rated job. My rated job was supply. So I did purchased all the supply related materials using a supply system. And then I also did credit card purchases. And then we maintained the inventory beneath the ship of engineering parts. That way we had our own basic parts depot for when things broke on the ship or when they had consumable items that needed to be replaced. So that was my rated job. And then, of course, you have a job once you get on the ship. You have shipboard duties. And so my shipboard duties were phone talker. And basically I related messages from the forecastle, which is the front of the boat, up to the bridge, and then to whoever else is on the line. That could be engineering, that could be aft steering, that could be the flight deck during special sea and anchor details. So I did that. I did phone talker in the ship's office or in the DC's office right next to the ship's office, working with the lead engineer, during different drills. And then I did flight details sometimes.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff that you just named. All of the purchasing, once again, the firefighting, the repair locker, damage control, all of the skills and resources that come with that. I mean, it's so many opportunities and so many options that we have, that young people have, that they just really need to know about, that they're there. It's so many options that young people have. They just really need to know that they're there. What key piece of advice do you have for any young adult that may be thinking of a career in the military?
So I guess my key piece of advice would be the same thing that I would give advice wise to an athlete or somebody who was a celebrity, maybe who had a great singing voice. You know, it's great that you can get a job singing, and it's great that you can get a job in the NBA or even at the military. But at the same time, the most important thing I think during that time is self development, professional development, learning, education, because that's going to be something that is your insurance policy. It's something that you can fall back on in case your plan A doesn't work. You have that plan B to make your plan A work.
Yes, that's superb advice. What key piece of advice would you have for an active duty member preparing to separate or retire?
Almost the same advice. You know, if you one of those folks who went throughout your career and didn't really focus on the education piece is very important. The certifications are very important. The last 5 years of my career, I made sure that I finished getting all my certifications, especially the government certifications that I needed, so that I put myself in a position where I'm hireable, I'm marketable, you know, from the gate. You know, sometimes you never know when that opportunity is going to come knocking, and you don't want to be still working on your classes. You want to already have that stuff done and in your resume. So that's one piece of advice. Be very responsive. Pay attention to everything that has to do with you as you get ready to separate. Meaning, attend all your appointments. You know, if you have medical boards or you have to meet with the VA, make sure you get all that stuff. Take it very seriously and get everything documented and get everything taken care of before you separate the service, because it's so much more difficult to do after you separate it. So while you still have the uniform on and you still got the badge and the access, and you're still on active duty, which means you still have a higher tier as far as service, that's the time to get everything done and accomplish that you need to accomplish to set yourself up post-military.
Phenomenal advice. So, T Rush, how do you
Yes, sir.
spend your days retired? What keeps you active? What keeps you busy these days?
And so even though I'm retired, I work uh, online. I support the Internal Revenue Service. I do their acquisition now, which is my job that I learned while I was still in the military, and the career field that I chose, and I got certified. And so I'm still supporting the government on the back end. Yes, I'm retired, so I know I don't have to do the job, but it's nice to have. And so I have that, and some of the things I like to do is I like to serve, and I like to do landscaping here at my house. You know, those things there are those post activities, I guess, for me at least, that just make it all have, you know, when I think back on it all, it's all worth it, because now I can kind of relax and just kind of live out my days and enjoy life a little bit more.
Man, that sounds great. All right, so we've reached our final question. You shared so much wonderful information today. The last question we have for you is, what do you think is the most valuable lesson that you learned from your military service?
I think the most valuable thing I learned is it's kind of two pronged. It's the ability to adapt to change fairly quickly. That's one. And then the power of diversity would be the other. And the two kind of go hand in hand, because, you know, as you work in the military, you're thrown together with people. You know, you you don't get a choice in the matter sometimes of where you may end up and the people that you may work or encounter work around. So that diversity is always going to be there, and that diversity is very valuable, because, you know, sometimes you don't always have the answer, and everybody is the hero of their own story, but everybody kind of has their own um, mindset or point of view, and so to hear those, even to hear opinions and things that conflict with what I've learned or what I was brought up to learn, you know, my background, those opinions are equally as valuable, because sometimes you can't see the answer or the solution to a problem unless you're on the outside looking in, So
Yeah.
I'd say that, and like I said, adaptability, because, situations throughout the military can change so quickly. You can be doing one thing one day and, be in an intense operation the next. You may be in downtime 1 minute and, doing a drill 10 minutes later and trying to save somebody's life or give them CPR or whatever the case may be. So, and you got to be prepared to turn off one switch or take off one hat and put on another hat that quickly. And so that is translated over to even the job that I do in acquisition, because, the higher ups or the executives go to a board meeting or something like that, then everything that we worked on for the last 6 months could easily change in a day or an hour, and we may be going in a completely different direction. If the budget doesn't get passed, we could be going in a completely different direction. The priorities tend to change too. Not always necessarily political, but a lot of it is political based, because that's part of the government. So being able to adapt to those changes, case in point, I think COVID taught us that hey, we need to be able to adapt to a world where you're stuck in traffic or you drive in 2 hours to work every day, to hey, I'm at home in this one little small room now, and I still got to be able to produce the same amount of work and the same quality of work from a different environment. So that, like I said, is probably the best thing that I took away from the military.
Adaptability and diversity. Couldn't have said it better myself, T. Rush. Well, thank you so much. It has been a privilege to have you here today. It was so great talking to you, so great seeing you. And thank you once again for joining us, and thank you for your service, most importantly.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, that's it from us. See you next time on the Veteran Kettle Podcast.
So just coming home.